Good day and welcome to the 74th episode of the podcast series Decolonizing the Mind. 2 weeks ago, I started with a sub series on Marxism, and then came a lot of developments in world affairs, world politics. Trump talking about Gaza, and now you have Ukraine and Palestine and the peace, the ceasefire accords. So I think I'll stop the sub series and move on to understand the things that are happening in the world now, um, because it's almost on a weekly basis that the world is changing. You have this important telephone chat between Trump and Putin, and according to the Kremlin, Trump spoke in favor of an early halt to hostilities and of solving the problems by peaceful means. Putin, for his part, mentioned the need for addressing the root causes of the conflict and agreed with Trump that a long-term settlement could be reached through peace talk negotiations. So what's happening here is that Putin is putting conditions, saying we can talk, but we have to address the root causes. And if you do that, we can make peace. They want to talk at the end of this month, February, and they'll talk in Saudi Arabia. And on the agenda is Putin, the situation around Palestine, and in general what they call the Middle East, Western Asia, and other regional areas. So they are not just going to talk about Ukraine. They are going to talk about how do Russia and the US look at the world today. And during the Biden and Obama administration, it was all about containing Russia, destroying Russia, and now there's another view of Trump. And the boycotts, the maximum pressures and boycott on the economy, that led to a horrible economic situation in Europe, rising oil and gas prices, but the Russian economy is still strong. So from the part of the section of a ruling class in the US, they realize war doesn't work. So they realize that the strategic goal that was set by Obama and Biden of a strategic defeat of Russia on the battlefield has turned out to be a strategic defeat for NATO, which is now split and in shambles. And already Trump gave away what he wants. Ukraine is not going to be in NATO. Russian troops occupy 20% of Ukraine. And from a population of 41 million, about 8 million Ukrainians have been internally displaced and 8.2 million have fled the country. So 16 million, almost half of the population, has been displaced. And defeat is hard to accept by the West. And so you see the pundits of the West who are on the side of Biden and Obama, their fantasies of a collapse of Russia has been shattered. If you follow Fareed Zakaria and Thomas Friedman, they lament the whole time that Trump is destroying Western policy, but they don't understand that Western policies has destroyed themselves, and that Trump is just collecting the pieces of that rubble. Now, interesting thing is what Marco Rubio said in an interview. Marco Rubio is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Secretary of State, and he used to be a hawk in the Republican Party. And apparently what Trump has done has brought in that hawk and cut his wings. And Rubio is talking now another language. In the interview he said, and I think that was lost at the end of the Cold War, because we were the concept of multipolarity. He said because we were the only power in the world, and so we assumed this responsibility of sort of becoming the global government in many cases, trying to solve every problem. And there are terrible things happening in the world. There are. And then there are things that are terrible that impact our national interests directly. And we need to prioritize that. So he's saying, look, the whole Ukraine thing is not in our national interest. So why do we bother with them? And it is because this old idea that the US is the cop of the world, needs to be the police cop of the world. So he says it's not normal for the world to simply have a unipolar power. Rubio saying that. That was an anomaly. It was a product of the end of the Cold War, but eventually you are going to reach back to a point where you have a multipolar world, multi-great powers in different parts of the planet. We face that now with China and to some extent Russia, and then you have rock states like Iran, North Korea that you have to deal with. So he doesn't know how to deal with Iran and North Korea, accepting that they are part of the multipolar world. Sorry. Now, look what he says. He said, sorry. So now, more than ever, we need to remember that foreign policy should always be about furthering the national interests of the United States, and doing so to the extent possible, avoiding war and armed conflicts, which we have seen 2 times in the last century be very costly. So this is the guy who was talking all the time about getting into war with Iran and fighting Russia, etc. And now he's saying we should do everything possible to avoid war and armed conflict. And they are saying about the Russians that they are celebrating the 80th anniversary this year of the end of the Second World War. That, and I think if you look at the scale and scope of destruction and loss of life that occurred, it would be far worse if we had a global conflict now. It may end life on the planet. And it sounds like hyperbole, but that's it. You have multiple countries now that have the capability to end life on Earth. And so we need to really work hard to avoid armed conflicts as much as possible, never at the expense of our national interests. So that's a tricky balance. And then the question comes later, is the state of Israel in the defense of the state of Israel in the national interest of the United States? That will be a very interesting discussion that we will see unfolding in the coming weeks, months, and years. So, given this type of policy, you can see that all the propaganda about Israel, US, Western Asia, I'll come back to it in more detail, you might get some surprises in the future if they acknowledged the multipolar world and they don't want to go into a nuclear war. Now, a few days ago, Scott Ritter had a very interesting interview on YouTube where he explained that Biden administration was ready for a nuclear war. They were setting up the whole system, what they thought was a limited nuclear war with Russia, and that the CIA said to them, guys, this will not be limited, it would be horrible, so don't go there. But the Biden administration, the Democratic Party, was already there to engage in a nuclear war. So basically Trump is saying we don't want to go there. And you have to understand the economic reason for it. The national debt of the US is $36 trillion. The GDP, the total GDP of the US is 27 trillion. I'm not talking about billion, I'm talking about trillion. A trillion is a million by million. You know, it's 1,000 billion, and a billion is 1,000 million. So the defense spending is 1 trillion, and now Trump has openly said, if we stop all these wars, we can cut the defense spending with 500 billion by half. You must understand that there is an economic motive for not going to war, and that part of the ruling class around Trump has seen that. And there's a reality check for them that they are not the rulers of the world anymore, and they have to deal with it. But then Palestine is a different thing. That is emotion. It's not in the national interest of the United States whether Israel exists or not. It doesn't bear on the national interest. The Israel used to be the cup of the economic interests of the United States, mainly the oil interests in Western Asia. That's true, but that's not no longer the case. The United States is not dependent on oil from Western Asia anymore. They are not. So they don't need the COP there. So the reason they are behind Israel is emotional, it's not economic. And mind you, the guys who are thinking in economics, they might be under the pressure of the Israelis and Zionist lobby, choose the side of Israel, but that can change. And Trump got a reality check when King Abdullah last week met him, and Trump was saying, look, you should take up hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Jordan, where already hundreds of thousands of Palestinians live. And it was a humiliating experience for King Abdullah not to be able to stand up on Trump. But when he said, look, we're going to take up 2,000 children for cancer treatment, Trump said, fantastic. But basically what Abdullah was saying, I'm not talking about hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. I'm talking about this is the utmost that we can do. And the Arab states, now they mock Trump, where these people were always in a kind of slave mode. Whatever, the US said they were going there and supporting US all the way. They have a declaration now on the 15th of February that said, we, the Arab states, want to see a Riviera, a Palestinian Gazan Riviera within an independent and internationally recognized state of Palestine. They are mocking Trump. You want a Riviera? Yes, we want a Riviera, but a Palestinian one. So they strongly reject any attempt to remove Palestinians by Gaza forcibly. So Trump can get the support from the Arab states. And that used to be otherwise in the past. And even Hamas mocks Trump. He says, we say in the declaration that the release of prisoners, Hamas said, we say to the whole world, there is no migration except to Jerusalem. And this is our response to all the calls for displacement and liquidation launched by Trump and those who support his approach from the forces of colonialism and occupation. Hamas saying, the one who is going to migrate is not us, are the Zionists. When we take over Jerusalem, they will flee. Now, the interesting thing is the Middle East, Western Asia is immensely complex. Take, for example, Erdogan. So don't take easy formulas to understand what's going on. Erdogan supports Israel, clearly. Israel is getting oil from Azerbaijan through Turkey in full support by Israel. But Erdogan's constituency is anti-Israel. And Erdogan has these Ottoman dreams. And so there was an interesting event the last day of last year, where there was a meeting where Erdogan spoke to his constituency, and in response to loud chants, this is what the Jewish News Syndicate is writing, in response to loud chants of, Mr. President, take us to Jerusalem, from a crowd of young people in Mardin, Turkey, during a December 22nd speech, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan shockingly responded, patience brings victory, instead of chiding the crowd about the inappropriate demand. So the Jewish newspaper is saying, Erdogan, you should tell these people, no, we are not going to Jerusalem. And now you tell me, yes, we are going, but we'll do it with patience. So they are saying, let there be any misunderstanding about the intent of this exchange. Erdogan has implied a number of times since 2020 that Jerusalem belongs to Turkey. Indeed, Devlet Bahçeli, leader of the National Movement Party, Erdogan's coalition partner, in an address the very next day reportedly declared that the goal was for Turkey to take Jerusalem, and that is in line with the resurgent neo-Ottoman posture of Erdogan. So this is a other complicating factors, and I don't even talk about Syria. Now, I'm following, the Zionist press, and one of the interesting, I think most interesting Zionist outlets is Memory. And on their website, they had a very interesting article about the tunnel system. And I think that article touched a lot about Hamas, to understand Hamas and understand their view. They said Hamas October 7 surprise success, which include the use of paragliders, the tearing down of the border fence, the taking of hostages, and the transport, along with bodies of the murdered, into the massive network of Hamas tunnels, was a huge military achievement for terrorist organizations and served as a model for others to follow in future attacks. So these Zionists are saying you should look at the October 7 as a model, not as an incident, as a model. And they quote Hamas leader Khaled Mashal, who said on October 26, which is 2 weeks, 3 weeks after the attack, on Egyptian television. He says, "The Russians told us that what happened on October 7 would be taught in military academies. The Chinese are thinking of carrying out a plan in Taiwan, doing what the Al-Qassam Brigade did on October 7. The Arabs are giving the world a master class," is what Mashal is saying. Mashal is saying the Russian and the Chinese look at October 7 and they say, "Man, how did you manage to do this?" And they use it as a class in the military, in the armies, to see, okay, this is how you could do things, which is amazing. And they go on, and Memory said the construction of at least 300 miles of tunnels right under the nose of Israel and even US intelligence was a stunning achievement. John Spencer, the chair of urban warfare studies at West Point Modern War Institute, the military academy of the US, outlined the extent of the tunnel network under Gaza in a July 1, 2024 speech. He says it's growing more and more difficult to describe Hamas' underground network in Gaza as the Israeli military continue discovering tunnels. The London metro is 402 kilometers. The New York subway is 399 kilometers. Seoul metro is 340 kilometers. The Gaza metro is believed to be over 500 kilometers and may end up being even bigger. And the interesting thing about the professionality of Hamas, they are being described in the West as a bunch of terrorists, but the resistance is so incredibly advanced, not only the tunnel building, when they produce videos about the release of the hostages, and in the West they call these videos propaganda videos, and they call their news the 8 o'clock news, not the 8 o'clock lies. And then you see Hamas uses drone cameras. And you see in a video, which I put in the link on Vimeo, how the hostages were held in a system that really can be detected. Because you ask yourself, after 50 months of war, why didn't they get the hostages? The system is way too complex. And Memory goes on, he says, detailing how tunnels are being built and used by terror organizations. They quote a study review the use for military exercises, communication and dissemination of data intelligence, training, transportation and logistics, resupply, storage and smuggling, weapons manufacturing, infiltration, exfiltration, medical evacuation, ambushes, maneuvering and flanking enemies, and for cover and concealment of fighters as a firing range, attacking or capturing soldiers, firing mortars and artillery, and for emplacing and deploying concealed multiple launch rocket system. Jihadi groups often provide contact information, including via WhatsApp, for supporters to send funds for the construction of tunnels and trenches, which alongside tunnels, jihadists have actively used now on many battlefields. So the tunnel is not just a tunnel. all these things they are mentioning, communication, hospitals, launching rockets, it's all underground. And that's why Hamas has not been defeated. And some Muslim Brotherhood scholar, Tariq al-Suwaidam, wants to take credit for the tunnels by saying you follow what's going on in Palestine and you follow those tunnels that the Palestinians have, and you know if you are following in the news that there are hundreds of kilometers, how do they dig it? Did you think how were they able to dig these tunnels? They happened in that they happened in 1 year when Mohammed Morsi was ruling. He gave them the equipment to do that. This is just nonsense. But they want to take credit of the tunnel system, which was conceived already during meetings between Hamas and Islamic Jihad and General Soleimani from Iran. You know, so this goes way back. It's not a thing that happened in a year. And memory continues, and this is an interesting thing. He says the use of tunnels should be seen as a warning. Tunnels have been a concern vis-à-vis the security of the US-Mexican border for decades. Former Ambassador to Mexico, Chris Landau, said on September 13, 2024, Hamas folk have this tunnel technology and the cartels in Mexico want to take advantage of that technology. This has got to be the number one national security interest of the United States, to make sure our borders are secure. It is well known that Mexican cartels are smuggling people into the US. On June 2024, it was reported that the Mexican drugs cartel were offering a special VIP package for moving people across the border. For $6,000 to $50,000, a cartel will smuggle a person across the border via a tunnel from Ciudad Juarez into El Paso, Texas. According to a senior Mexican official, a joint investigation by Mexican and US authorities found that one cartel has been smuggling at least thousands of migrants through the tunnels into El Paso every month. So, you see why the US is worried that the tunnel system is now used by the drugs cartel to transport people, but not only people, also drugs and obviously also weapons. So the world is changing by the week, as I said, and I'm going to see, coming weeks, whether I continue with analysis by the week of world affairs or move back to the discussion of the book. But understanding what is going on with Trump and the Trump administration, the context is only if you see that there is a section of the ruling class in the United States that uses common sense. We don't like their racist rhetoric and the support for Zionism, but mind you, the fact that they want to reduce the defense budget by cutting it in half from 1 trillion to 500 billion, the fact that they want to end the endless wars means that they are doing good things. And people don't like to hear that, but that's the case. And I'm going to follow this by the week. So thank you very much for your attention and hope to see you next time. Thank you very much.